Hey, boat friends. What I thought I'd do this morning is a short, hopefully quick and easy video on the replacement of an ignition switch, an ignition cylinder in a standard Johnson Evinrude basic BRP setup. These things are everywhere. They're pretty common, but searching around, I didn't see a lot of content on them. Certainly didn't see very many wiring diagrams. A lot of questions, not a lot of answers. So if the internet needed one more video, I would add my thoughts to the collection. So I'm going to start here in the house, and then we'll take it outside to the boat to do the actual work. But I wanted to show a couple of things first here. This is the switch, the standard BRP Johnson Evinrude ignition switch, which is good for pretty much all of the last 20 years of, right up through Gen 2 E-Techs. The symptom that I was having on the boat wasn't related so much to the ignition switch, but to the safety lanyard. They just get sloppy. They get worn out. Someone's going to mention in the comments that I could have probably just gotten a clip for the old cylinder. Spoiler alert, I was having issues with the cylinder too. There was kind of a dead spot in the cylinder. So it was working okay, but I hate that. I've had plenty of boats where I needed to worry about what was going to happen when I turned the key. I'm kind of done with that. Don't like that anymore. So fiddling with the ignition is not something I wanted to continue to do, although I probably wouldn't be changing the cylinder if it weren't for the problem with the ignition clip. And let me tell you what that is. If you have one of these, you probably know that you push the center of the spring-loaded cylinder in and then capture it behind this clip, which snaps over the top. And that's how you operate the boat. Normally, you've got this part of the lanyard connected to your person. And should you fall backward into the cockpit or overboard, theoretically, you would pull that off, and this thing would pop out, and the boat would stop running. Now, it'll be relevant when we talk about the wiring diagram to talk about how this thing works. I think some people think that there's some magical circuitry going on inside here which powers that kill circuit. Let's talk about how this thing is wired. I'll show you the wiring diagram. I made a wiring diagram. I will put a photo of this in at the end of the video so that if you want to gaze at it and marvel in its brilliance, you'll have plenty of time to do that. You can screenshot it, do whatever you like with it. This is the one thing that I didn't see a lot of online. Word of caution, when you start doing a project like this, don't go by the wiring colors. Never trust the wiring colors. Always go by the function. Two reasons for that. One, anybody who's been in the boat building business will tell you there were just days when they were building pigtails or wiring harnesses where you just couldn't get black wire with yellow tracer. It just wasn't available. So they used something else. Stuff happens. The other part of the problem is, unless you're a Rockefeller and you're driving a brand new boat, in which case you're not listening to this video anyway. But if you're like the rest of us with used boats, every single previous owner has done something like we're going to do here today. They've gotten in and monkeyed around with stuff, and you have no idea what they did. So don't necessarily trust the wiring colors. These are the wiring colors from the factory, and we'll go by those. But the best thing to do is to do it positionally. Look at the old switch, which is congruent to the new switch. If everything's working and you swap things one for one, everything should be fine. So here's what we've got on the, I'll show you both the diagram here and if you can see that, and the switch itself. There's 6 pins. And there's 6 individual bullet connectors that come off the harness. When we get in the boat, you'll see that. But these are labeled. There's an A. You're not going to be able to see the letters on them, but there's an A. There's an M. There's a B, or some of them say P. There's another M over here. There's an S. And then there is one in the center that says C, or I think in some other cases it can have a different letter. I don't remember what the other letter is, but this one says C. So this is where your 12-volt battery supply goes to. It goes to the B. The 2 M's are interesting. This one is the ground, straight to the boat's ground. This one is also ground. It's known as the stop circuit. They both say M because that stands for magneto, which is a term that's left over from well before our time. That comes from outboard motors in the era of Vasco da Gama. Vasco da Gama's first outboard had magnetos on it. Yours doesn't, but all you need to know is grounding across these two is like using that, that metal tab that was hanging over the spark plug on your grandfather's lawnmower. You press it with your foot against the top of the spark plug and the motor shuts off. That's what happens when you ground across those two. So that's the stop circuit. When you bring this thing back to the off position, you're touching across those two, stops the motor from running. So power, ground, accessory. So this is when the key is in the on position, but you haven't turned it all the way to start. So all of the things that are in your boat that depend on the ignition being on to be powered up come off of here. And then there's the start circuit. You turn it all the way. So pretend that we're looking at the inside of the switch. You turn the key partway on, you get it crosses from here to here, right? So the accessory circuit is now powered up. One more turn all the way over. The spring-loaded turn at the end powers this, and now this, which engages your starter. You let that go, it comes off of this one and stays on this one as long as the key is in that clicked accessory position. That's how you run your boat for the rest of the day until you turn it off and you turn it back and it grounds across these two and your motor shuts off and everything's good. Now let's talk about the emergency stop circuit. We forgot one, the middle wire. The reason I forgot it is, doesn't really matter unless you have a push to choke system on your boat. Older carbureted motors have that, and you'll see instructions right next to the ignition cylinder that tell you push in for choke. That's what this terminal is for. I don't believe it has any use on a fuel injected, electronically controlled motor like an E-Tech. This is going in a boat with a 200 E-Tech, by the way, a 2012 E-Tech 200. The stop circuit. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the way that these work, and if you have one, you know this already, you just engage, you push the center of the cylinder in, and then you engage the clip until it clicks. This one's brand new, so it's really tight. And then you're ready to go. That's how it will stay most of the time unless you fall off the boat, right? Well, here's how this works. There's no magical stop circuitry in there. You just put your key in. There's your accessory position, which we talked about. There's your start position. And when you let that go, it goes back to the accessory position. Your boat's powered up. If you were to fall off the boat and this thing were disengaged, all that happens is, you can see the angle that the key is at there. All that happens is it turns the key back to vertical. It just springs it back into the off position as if you physically turned the key to the off position. That's all that happens. There's no magical other circuitry in here. It's just physically turning the key back to off. Now, the cool thing about these BRP cylinders is you don't actually need this thing to then run the boat. If you have it engaged and it comes out, it shuts the boat off. But now that the boat is off and you don't have this installed, you can just use this like a regular ignition cylinder, accessory, start, run. So if you fall off the boat and you take this thing with you and your buddy's on the boat, the good news is the key will still be in ignition and he can start the motor back up and come get you. That's about all you need to know, I think, for the bench portion of this. Now let's go out in the boat and take the old one out and get this one in. See how it works. See you in a bit.
So here is the diagram that we made, showing it here, and I'll show it again at the end.
All right, we're inside the boat now. And just to reiterate what the problem was, this is the old setup in here. And if you install the cutoff, safety cutoff lanyard switch clip, the problem is it's just there's no friction anymore. It's worn. I did try the new clip on this old cylinder, and it's slightly better, but it's not much better. So the fact is, both pieces are kind of worn down. So we're going to replace the entire cylinder with a new lanyard clip, and we'd start doing that by removing this nut that holds the cylinder in place. Now all this stuff is nylon, so you want to be sort of gentle with it. The nut and the cylinder are all made of nylon. So we'll just sort of gently nudge this loose. And it should come off. There we go. You can see that the binnacle cover itself is held on with 4 of these screws. It's kind of overkill. That's a long screw for what it's being asked to do. I've removed those already. You didn't even watch me twisting a screwdriver for 10 minutes. So those 4 screws, which come out from around the perimeter, have all been taken out. And now the cylinder itself is loose in there. So we're just going to sort of get that out of the way and pull this whole thing up. Watch out for the little rubber button cover, which goes on the neutral release when you want to rev your engine without going anywhere. So you've got those 2 pieces, the cover and the rubber button cover. Set those aside. And now we've got pretty much everything that we're going to be dealing with. We've got the keep in mind there's a spacer behind that, so all of these threads don't stick out the front of the thing. It's made, this thing can go through dashes of various depths. So there is a spacer in there. You don't get a new one of those with the new part. So let's set that aside. And now we're looking at the cylinder with the 6 wires that we described earlier. And now it's just a matter of transferring these wires to the new unit. Now, these have bullet connectors behind them and rubber boots over the top of them. What I'm going to do, I'm actually going to pull these rubber boots back on all of them to expose the entire connector, because I don't like working the connectors without being able to see what I'm doing. And also we're going to get some, we're going to put some protection on these wiring contacts when we get to the end. Explain more about that when we get to it. So let's just pull these boots back. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do here, these things are not trivial to get off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start doing the transfers around the edge here and expose that center one so I can get that boot back because they're a little stubborn. So let's start with figuring out the orientation of these things. Take this nylon nut off and save that for later. The orientation is there's a flat spot on top, as you can see. That flat spot corresponds to a flat spot in the cover right here, which keeps the cylinder from turning on itself when you turn the key. So the flat spot is the top orientation. Conveniently, it's in the same place where the manufacturer's name and patent number is. So you're pretty good to go. Interestingly, these also have a number at the top. That one says 75, that one says 76. But I believe that's a key code. The keys have that same number on it. So that number would tell you if you lost your key and needed to go to a dealer and get a new one, you could just get a number 76 key to fit in that spot. Okay, so the very top wire here is the battery wire, which according to our diagram is red with a purple stripe. And lo and behold, that's actually what it is. It's red with a purple stripe. So let's see if that's going to come off by hand. It's going to need a little persuasion, I think. Let's just get behind that a little bit. Throw our weight into it. And pop it off. So here's our first victim. Wire number one. These have grease on them a little bit, so the contacts are greased up. So there you go. Top orientation, center wire, pin B, red with purple stripe. Snap that on. Connection number one is made. Let's move to the next one down is the magneto wire. This is straight ground. And we'll give that one a bit of a tug. And move that one down to the next available pin. Right. Now we've kind of got that center boot exposed, so let's pull that puppy back. And there we go. Now we get all the boots back. Next one down is theoretically a purple wire, straight purple wire, which is the keyed power. This is the what we would call the accessory position. Stuff that comes on when you turn the key prior to starting the engine or when the engine's running. Pop that one on. These things click on there pretty firmly, which is good, except for this short portion where it's hard. Oh, that can't be that hard, can it? There you go. All right. Next one around, let's do that center wire. The center wire is purple with a white stripe, and it's the one we identified as probably not doing anything in this configuration. It's the push to choke circuit. But that's going to go right there. And give that one a little love to get in there. We have two left. We have the one from the neutral safety switch, which is essentially the starter wire. It's the S terminal. That's the yellow with the red stripe. We'll do that one next. And the last one is the black with the yellow stripe, which is the magneto, the other part of the kill circuit. The engine shut off circuit, not to be confused with the kill switch. All right, those are on. One last time, for good measure, we'll look at our diagram, which I made in PowerPoint, by the way, in case you think that all PowerPoint stuff needs to be terrible and soul-crushing. There's a PowerPoint slide that's actually not so bad. Okay. Purple with white to the center. Yellow with red here. Black with yellow there. Red with purple there. Straight black. Straight purple. Looking good. All right. You could just slide these boots back on and be done with it. But we're going to put a little protection on these contacts. You can go on the internet and find yourself a pretty good debate over whether you should use dielectric grease or some other kind of lubricant on electronics on boats. I'm telling you, no argument I've ever seen. Ford versus Chevy, Yankees versus Red Sox, Protestants versus Catholics. Nothing engenders the kind of ferocious argument as whether you should use conductive or non-conductive grease on these fittings. A lot of people will tell you to use dielectric grease on these. Here's the thing. Dielectric grease is non-conductive. If you smear non-conductive grease all over these fittings and then snap these things on, they'll probably still work. But the grease is not helping you. It's actually creating an insulator between the contact and the clip. There's enough mechanical pressure on these that it would probably be just fine. But why would you want to do that? So we're not going to do that. I would put dielectric grease on the outsides of these now if I were going to use that product, which would keep moisture and corrosion and stuff from happening from the outside. And I would know that all of my contacts inside the clips were really strong. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use something else. Here's what we use. It's called corrosion inhibitor. And some folks may be familiar with this stuff called BOA Shield, made by Boeing, or for Boeing, used in the aircraft industry. They're both the same thing. It's basically an aerosol spray that gives you a light coating of a brownish, waxy substance that's just absolutely impervious to moisture and corrosion and everything else. It's great for the outsides of electrical contacts, just like this. And it gets pretty much everywhere. So it's a good idea to kind of mask off the parts of this that you don't want to get this stuff on. What comes right off with acetone, so it's not a big deal. But I'm just going to give this a little spray there on everything, and then turn it over, get the other side. Right. Put that like that. Using my beautiful diagram. It's a masking device. It's a tragedy. All right, that's all you need. And those contacts are well protected. All right, man. Time to start the reassembly. We'll begin by pushing these boots back into position. Man, they go on way easier than they came off. That's good news. That inhibitor spray is kind of helping. It's sort of lubricating them. I'm gonna get that middle one back on before I get too many of these other ones in there. A little hard to reach. And on. This one on. And one more. Boom, just like downtown. Love it. Okay.
All right, so we're going to wrap this up. There's literally nothing else interesting to say about this project. At this point, it's just a reverse process of the disassembly. You'll pop that cylinder back into the binnacle cover, screw it down with a nylon nut, and then reinstall the 4 screws to attach it to the console. So pretty simple. I think, after 20 minutes of listening to me ramble about how the switch works and what it does and watching me push and pull the bullet connectors, you probably get it. Also, I think folks are mostly interested in what's on the screen now, which is this wiring diagram. This is the thing I found the most difficult to find. And it didn't even come with the instructions with the brand new part, which is an OEM part. So I'm not sure why they're keeping this a secret. Anyway, I hope this was helpful for you in your own project. Be safe out there. And thanks for joining Captain Chris on Buzzards Bay.